I'm back on this circle reverse gear for this grader I've been working on. And we've tried, we've looked, we've called around. I've taken this whole unit in. We're not gonna be able to get this seal. We're just not gonna be able to get it. What we can do is get a encased, shaft seal. And it would sit right, it's the same physical thickness of this. This is actually, when I put the mic on it, it was a 1/2 inch and maybe, was it 50 thousandths? Let me see. I can't see nothing here, but, and she squished a little, but yeah. 0.550 is probably what it used to be. Thick. And the way it works, when I put this seal in this case here, you can see that it squishes it. When I put that in there and I measure the ID of this and the OD of the gear or sealing surface that goes in here, it's about 1/8 of an inch off. It's significantly bigger than what I've seen, because I got this housing cleaned up to take it in to have it looked at. And the problem is this seal uses this surface and this surface, as it sits in there like this to seal. And the weight of the gear holding it down actually squishes this some, and it almost seals up. I put it in there and filled it up with water yesterday when I was cleaning it. Just a little bit of grease on there to get everything to slide. And it went in there. And it almost held water, almost. It wasn't leaking real bad, but it was definitely leaking. It's not going to hold oil. So what my original thought was, if we get another 1/2 inch seal to put in here, the gear, it's not going to use this top surface anymore. That's going to be metal, and we don't want metal on metal action there. So we're going to have to get this case up. And I thought, well, I could just drill a hole in the bottom of this, because there's no support at the bottom or the top. It uses this. So I thought, well, I'll drill and tap a hole in there and thread it. And same thing I did on these brakes, where the center hole is, for when that thing was turned on centers, I'll just stick a ball bearing in there. Since this whole lower housing down here takes grease, it'll be perfect. And we can use that bolt threaded in that bore, to get the lift we need to get it up off this, what will be a metal encased seal. Well, when I measured the thickness of that, it's only, 3/10 of an inch thick. So, and I believe it's cast iron. It might be cast steel. But either way, what I would need to do to make sure this hole is centered in there would be to come down with a hole saw from the top that's going to fit in tight to this bushing to get the pilot to stick in there, to then drill through it. But then I'm not left with much thread. Now I could braze or weld on the nut to the bottom and a second nut, and that would give us more height and thread and everything. But then I thought about it and going, well, shit, this almost looks like it used to have a thrust bearing on it. And I looked at the manual, and it does not. And when I put the unit down in here, this big gear in here, I'm not hurting it, rolling it, believe me. When I put this in here, this bottom surface here was actually 1/10 off the bottom. So I thought, well, shit, if I get a 2/10 thrust washer in there, or 2 1/10 thrust washers, I could probably stake one to the bottom, maybe stake one to the bottom of the gear, epoxy it, whatever. So you just have 2 thrust surfaces running together, and grease is going to come up in between them. I thought, okay, well, shit, what do I got to test this? Well, I had I had some old aluminum collars for some. They're really piss poor coilover conversion kits. But I milled that, or turned on the lathe down to 200,000. It's actually like 198. But close enough. I'm gonna stick that in there, stick this unit back in there without the seal, and see how much clearance I have up here. I should be able to measure it. I got some basic measurements beforehand, so I should be able to look at that and see if that's gonna work, or see if I need to, if it's way too much clearance, I might take it down a little bit. But I think it's 100 thousandths lift, or a tenth of an inch, which is going to raise this section of the worm gear up a tenth of an inch from whatever center it did have. And let me get a tenth of an inch on there. If the center, I'm trying to find a point on here, there's a little point. If the center was there, now it's here. So I don't think it's going to be a problem. It might actually move, the wear to a different spot, because it is kind of beat up. It's going to work just fine, but you can see it's got some wear on it. So I'm going to set this up in the GoPro, set this down, you can see how this works. Okay, got you set up. So the only problem, I forgot to mention this, with going with the metal encased seal is this seal, when you shove it down into this bore, which you need to do first, the bottom section where this bird cage gear is actually wider in diameter. So this section here is wider in diameter than the seal surface that goes down in it. And that thing being soft rubber, it allows it to, open up and get down in there. Now, if you try to hang it up here and then set it down, it will not physically fit in the OD of the bore. It'd probably cut it. Now, this gear does come off of the shaft and lower bird cage piece, but it's just a splined section. I don't believe it's pressed on, it being splined. And it looks like I can almost see clearance. It's got oil and stuff leaking out of it. But it's got an O-ring in there, and it is mighty pissed off. I wasn't able to just flip it upside down and beat it, so now not having to fight that bigger seal to get this started, it should be a little easier. Okay. So that's that, and unfortunately, I've already taken the bushings out of this section in the back cap piece, so I'm not going to be able to, put the worm gear in there and then see where it's at. I could make some little shit bushings to try to hold it, but I'm not about to take that kind of time. Again, 100 thousandths or a tenth of an inch lift. Of course, with the naked eye, you don't notice, especially once it's assembled in here, but check my space. Now, is that about double what I had earlier? It's not quite double. Believe it or not, earlier, I shoved this guy in there as kind of like a feeler gauge, and it was perfect when the seal was in there. And yeah, it's at 102 thousandths. So that's why I made that spacer 200 thousandths, which came out to 198. So I mean, it's 4 thousandths shy. But now what I need to do is stick the top housing piece on here and make sure, because the top of this shaft never did contact the ID roof of the cap that goes on here. So I'm gonna grab that real quick, set it on. Make sure there's no problem. thing is pretty gross. I have not cleaned it yet, so I'll give it a quick spray. I need to pull the O-ring off of this, so I don't have to fight it. I need to replace it anyway. There's no sense in keeping it on there any longer. There. Make sure there's no trash in this lip that's going to hold us up. That's my luck. There'll be a piece of silicone in here or something that's just thick enough to not let it touch until it's cleaned off, and then it'll grind. Let's see. So the only thing about this cap that may hit is this surface here. Don't think it will, but it looks like there's supposed to be something here. There's not. Check the manual. There's not. Yeah, it definitely looks like something's supposed to go in there. We got all kinds of trash in the center of this also. Oh yeah, I've got all kinds of shavings in here. Oh yeah. When I had to get the old bushing out of here. That was quite a treat. Getting that out. So what I don't do, take too much film. I'm just too scattered. I don't have shit ready. That is, I think of one thing like that damn, bolt through the bottom I do. I almost started drilling on that, and then this morning I don't remember what made me think of it, but I thought, maybe a bushing would fit in there. Okay, so that is rubbing. Yeah. Now, if I measure this gap here, it's going to be a 10. Well, that's that. That raised it up. This is just something else hanging up. Feels like it's spinning nicely though. I don't think it's just one piece of anything in particular holding it up. Yeah. I'm gonna put a dab of grease down here and see if it transfers it to the top. See if we're actually hitting on this thrust surface down here. Actually, I'll put it on this surface to see if we're running on what looks like a thrust surface here, or by chance if we're rubbing on the top of this. Don't know if this is too big. This cap piece, I don't know if it's too big to chuck in the lathe, but I know the shaft and gear is not too big. I think it make more sense to, I don't know, because if I choose, either one, if I take a 10th down or 150 off of this, just give me some clearance, then it may hit here, and I might have to do both. Yeah, it's definitely running on that thrust surface. Definitely. Yeah, I can't I don't think there's any way to check this up in my lathe. So, might have to think of something else. That, and I still haven't checked in here to see where we're at. Actually, I'm gonna take this off of here. We'll get a bird's eye view again. Yeah, and I could see it's raised up in the center there. So depending on where the lip seal actually rides, what I need to do is get some feeler gauges and measure that actual gap that's in there. And then go back through my measurements and see. I think it's right where it wants to be. I might be able to take like, I don't know, 50 thousandths off of the guy here. Because my original measurement that I was going to give it was not going to be 2/10. It was going to be 175 thousandths. So I would actually take off 25 thousandths from here. But still, up on the top, we're showing, 110 thousandths gap. So, I guess what I need to do is take this back out, take the puck out, put the original gasket back in. Well, how am I going to get a measurement of that though? I'd need putty or something to put up in there, build it up, and then see what the squish is, see how much clearance I have there. Well, and this is why I don't video. I thought for sure I was gonna have a good solution here, but I do not. So, well, wait a minute. My seal, that's not 10th. I was thinking, well, maybe I can just make a spacer for this and it's not gonna matter as long as I can bolt it down. If that's a thrust surface, shit, good for that. It's got oil in there, it'll be fine. If I just made a spacer for this, but then that's gonna pull that O-ring up too far. If the O-ring was farther down in the landing, or in this orientation, if the O-ring sat farther up and would get down into here far enough to still seal, it'd probably be fine. But then again, if this was a whole gasket surface, then an inner O-ring doesn't need to be. I'm gonna think about this and come back to it. Okay, I've thought a lot about this. I've tried a couple different things. I did have these actual thrust washers that are like 95 thousandths thick, almost a tenth, or just under a tenth, which was my original gap in here when I had the original seal packing in there, and I measured it. Well, I just went and put this 100 thousandths in there, or 95 thousandths, one on each side, and I went to go put the cap on, and the cap was still about 20 thousandths from sealing, from being able to just touch on this surface. So I kind of feel like a genius and an idiot if this is the case, because like I said, I had put this seal in here and filled it up with water, and it seemed like it was almost gonna seal, almost. Well, I thought it was just the weight of the gear that sat down. I thought it just kind of floated in there. Well, I didn't put two and two together that there is a thrust surface on the cap. It doesn't look like it's been heavily used, but it's definitely there. There's nothing at the bottom, never was. It never touched, it floated. But what I think is the cap pushing down on the top of that gear is going to squish this seal enough to make this work. That's my hopes. So I'm going to attempt to do that. I'm going to put this thing back in. And the other reason for this is I was thinking about this this gear here. I thought, well, what could I do with it to make this work? Because I really don't want to lift it up too high or down too low and get out of where it's happy because of the geometry of this worm gear. 100 thousandths or a tenth of an inch, it might have been a little pissed off. So I thought, well, the real problem is we don't want this top surface contacting the seal. And I thought, well, shit, I could just press this gear off of here and then cut that down. But that's still not going to set the height of the cap down. Like that was not going to work, and it wouldn't squish. I'd have to make a gasket, a real thick gasket to go up here. So again, thinking about it thoroughly, I think that cap does provide enough down pressure to squish this seal enough to make it seal. Squish the packing enough to make it seal. So I'm going to give this a go. I don't know how I'm going to get it to try to hold water is the problem. I would need to seal up this side and this side with something. I need a big old butt plug, inflatable butt plug or something to put in these holes. I'll figure something out, but let's just see if what I'm thinking might actually be the case. And the other, I didn't mention it, but the problem with the bird cage gear being slightly bigger in diameter, I wouldn't be able to then, if we had the straight seal in there, I couldn't put this lower unit in and then press this gear onto it. Like if it fell on, just a splined, sloppy fit, then yeah, it'd go. But again, with that O-ring on there, it's I imagine it's going to take quite a bit of pressure to get it on there because I couldn't get it off. Okay, so there's that. There's no spacer in the bottom, and I could get, I can get this what was it, 95 thousandths washer in there. Okay, it's a little tight, but it's like feeler gauge tight. But now, when I put this cap on here, you can see we're still not there. Huh. I think we've solved the case. And you know, if we needed more squish, I guess this makes way more sense now. If we wanted, if that seal was getting pissy, we could add a shim to the top, or you know, a thrust to the top. And right now, this gap, it's not much. Like I could almost squeeze it with my hand. I don't know that that's going to be enough to do it. Let's just squeeze it and shove this in here. A little bit. But that's how we get more squish out of it, is actually putting a shim thrust washer here on top of this gear. That would force it down, putting more pressure on that seal, squishing it down. It can't go out, it would have to go in and seal tighter. And I think that's how we do this. And that's great, because the seal that we could get, it's kind of expensive, 160 bucks. And I would have to permanently manipulate, molest something here. Probably a couple things here to make everything happy, and then maybe come to find out our center line of the worm would be too high or too low, and it would maybe bind or just not make good contact and prematurely wear. So, shit, I'm glad I figured this out. I was just thinking this morning, you know, I need to get in and drill this, and then I started thinking about it, like, is there a better way? And I thought this was going to be the way. Well, that's the way. Not down there, up top. So, I think I'm going to start, I don't know how thick or how thin wheels we can get here, but they need to have at least 2.5 center opening, and the OD doesn't need to be any larger than I mean, call it 4 inch, same as what I thought the bottom would be. So I think that would work. Unfortunately, there's only one way to find out, and that's just to do it. So I'm gonna make a couple calls, see what we can get as far as thrust washers. If I have to make them, I can. I'd just rather not. It's just a thrust surface. We should be able to make something work. I mean, aluminum would probably work. It'd probably just ball up something crazy in there and just make a mess. Don't want to do that. Have to use some sort of bronze, or, you know, whatever these are. So that's it. I think that's the solution. I just need to figure out what we want as far as the squish here, because I think right now we've only got, I don't know, maybe 10 thousandths of squish. Maybe. Son was using feeler gauges yesterday to set clearance on these brakes. And I don't know what happened to them. I'm gonna take a look real quick. Oh, roll that boy up. I don't know what we did with it. A couple here, I might be able to find something there. We got fairly centered. Easy. It feels close. Well, it's hard to tell with it rocking. See, that's only, yeah, it's about 25 thousandths. So, I think what I need, I don't know if they're making that thin, but that's what I need. On the other hand, there's two other ways of going about that. Machine the cap of this down a little bit, or the top of this housing down a little bit, or machine the cap a little bit. I just think I think that'd be the right thing to do, would be inside here where there's already thrust surfaces planned from the get-go. So, you know, if I did something like that, we could have as much as we needed to squish that and make that happen. And just out of curiosity, yeah, it's 225,000. So I think we're gonna want washers in 10 thousandths. 20 thousandths would be nice. I don't know. So right now we have 25-ish. I don't know what that's going to translate to on the squish here. It might be just enough to seal it, but I would rather we had a little extra. And if need be, I could probably just take some stainless shim stock and just cut it to fit. I don't think that'd be too big of an issue. Of course, we don't want stainless. We want something that would wear before these surfaces wear. So, okay, now I've got a better plan. So I might get on the horn and try to find some stuff. Okay, I figured it out, and half of you were probably screaming at me as I was thinking through this process. Instead of adding something here that, you know, we're gonna run into trying to get one thin enough, we could just make a sheet metal, you know, spacer to go on the bottom side of the big O-ring. If we lift the floor however much we want to compress, it has the same effect. And the seal stays seated to the bore, and you know, we'll probably end up putting a little bit of smearing a little silicone in there just to make it stay and not want to slip on the OD. But that's an even better idea. And I've got a few different thicknesses of sheet metal to where the smallest one I got, it was like 25 thousandths. I got a 30 thousandths. I got a few different thicknesses, so we could play with that a little. I don't know why I didn't think of this before, but that's probably the best idea yet. So I got to it. It took a while. I never said I was quick.